Okay, in today's video, I'm going to give you a full review of the Harley-Davidson Pan America. Before I give a review on any motorcycle, I like to make sure I get some miles down on it. I have now put several thousand miles down on this motorcycle and feel like I know it well enough to give you my honest opinion. Now keep in mind, I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to give you the good and the ugly, and there are certainly some of both when it comes to this motorcycle. I'll tell you about what I have done on this bike and what I am basing my review on. I've taken this bike across Utah through Zion, over a couple mountain passes and canyons out there. I rode state highways and interstates, took it all the way to Durango, Colorado, which also took me over the $1 Million Highway. I did some off-roading, I did mountain passes, I did Cinnamon Pass, and I did Engineer Pass in Colorado. Both some pretty extreme dirt and off-road riding where I got to test this thing on elevations coming down steep grades where I had to stop the weight of this motorcycle, which is something we're gonna get into, as well as carry that weight up some of these steep grades in loose gravel. And that's some different kind of riding. From Durango, I came north all the way up to Sturgis Motorcycle Rally, which is where I find myself today. Now, I took the bike across a lot of the Black Hills, and I even took it into some of the off-roading they have around here, and I got to put this bike to some of those tests. So there you have it. After a few thousand miles, I feel like I've got a good basis to speak about this bike and give you, the rider, my honest opinion should you be considering purchasing a Harley-Davidson Pan America. Now, I'd like to start with the overall look of the bike. I think it is a very aggressive look. I do like the sloped, angled down front end, kind of gives it like a Dakar or Baja kind of look. The exposed frame is also really nice. You can see here on my bike, I actually powder coated the frame. In fact, this is a vinyl wrap and powder coating. And this here, this is all like custom paint work that I had put on there. And I also painted the wheels and the Brembo, and you know, I just kind of made this bike mine. But the tail end looks good from the factory. But overall, I do like the look of this motorcycle. It's got a nice LED screen with lots of options for adjustments and tech inside there. Comes with heated hand grips, built-in ride modes, adjustable levers, an adjustable windscreen, electronic automatically adjusting suspension that can raise and lower. Overall, I really like the look of this motorcycle. I think it's a good-looking bike, every bit as good-looking as any other adventure bike on the market. It is a 1250cc engine, which is large. 1250 cc's for any adventure bike is kind of the top tier. It is among the largest of the options for adventure bikes on the market. So when we're looking for an adventure bike, first we have to decide what is it we want out of that bike. There are many people who ride bikes like this all across country, touring as their main touring motorcycle. Me personally, I have some V-twin baggers and other bikes that are really my on-road touring bikes. When I got this bike, I was not looking for it to be my main cross-country touring motorcycle. More of a motorcycle that I used on the road to get to the trail. And that may be a completely different experience or need for each one of you out there. That's something you're gonna have to assess yourself. So really my thought with this bike was to do about 70% off-road and 30% on-road. Now on this trip it didn't play out that way, and I'm glad the bike was set up more for on-road, but that's gonna be my first point of this motorcycle. When it comes to adventure bikes, I think this falls more in the on-road category than the off-road. But don't get me wrong, as you saw earlier in this video, and as I'll tell you, it is a completely capable off-road machine. I just think that this bike really shines on-road, even with the knobby tires I have on here. By the way, those are Michelin Anarchy Wilds. Even with those tires, it does perform really well on the road. Boasting 150 horsepower, and when it comes to road bikes, the fairly lightweight, this thing is an absolute rocket ship out there. It's got all the power you need to get up and get around or run alongside any bike or car you would want to. The electronic suspension I found to be very good on the highway. It was plush enough to enjoy a comfortable long distance ride across an interstate or, like I said, a highway, but yet stiff enough to be able to lean into the corners and still enjoy ripping some mountains and canyons, which I also got to push it through. As far as the on-road manners, this thing is an absolute beast. It performs flawlessly and is really a joy to ride. Now, if you're coming from the touring world, you're used to forward controls, and on almost all adventure bikes, you're gonna find these mid controls, which give you superior handling off-road or in canyons. It's just a better performance position for your foot. There's just no arguing that, even though I'm sure I will get some arguments down in the comments. But there isn't nothing to argue. It's a superior foot position. It gives you far more control of your motorcycle. And while they are great for performance, For me, I'm 6'2", 230 pounds. They're not the most comfortable for long distance to have my legs underneath me like that. Side note, you can always stand up, which stretches your legs nicely, and you can get highway mounted pegs to put up here to stretch your legs out. I simply don't have them yet. It truly was, pun intended, a pain point for me on the long distance riding. This windshield and fairing does an ample job of protecting you from the wind, but if you're comparing it to the fairing on my road glide, the wind buffeting and the experience there is definitely not as nice. That being said, I did not find it to be bad or intrusive or abrasive in any way. It's just not as well protected as a full touring road glide, which all of you should be able to expect without even looking at the bike. Also, the ability to load up plenty of luggage, saddlebags, duffel bags across the back. This is my L Sandoval bag. If you're interested in it, it's 100% dry, 100% waterproof, and you can get it from my friends over at 03D. I use this bag on my adventure rides and on my street rides. Hell, because of its tuck-away built-in backpack, it's even my airport luggage. But the bike holds the luggage well. It's set up nicely to carry a good load of luggage down the interstate. And if I'm gonna be honest, it also carried it fairly decent in the off-road riding. Okay, now let's talk about the off-road section of this motorcycle. Here's where you're gonna find a few of the things where I don't feel like this bike really shined as well as I had hoped, but also some areas that shined even better. Let's start with the positive. I found the gearing and the shifting really well for off-road. I had no problems finding the right gear and having enough power to get me through situations, even if in a moment's notice I found myself in the wrong gear. Also, for moderate riding, I did find the suspension fairly plush and enjoyable. It made it really nice across the gravel roads or light dirt trails. The clearance on this motorcycle was also decent enough to get me through most stuff without issues. But I will say that is one of the first negatives about this thing off-road, is the clearance is a little bit less than some of the other bikes, and I did bottom out a couple times. Luckily, I had the right equipment on the bike that protects the bike, and I just bounce off the skid plate and go on. No real big deal, but I would have liked to seen it with a little bit more clearance. Well, we might as well just keep going into the other things that I really didn't like about this bike. One of the things I don't like is the radiator being right behind the front tire. As you can see here with all this dirt, it just gets packed with dirt, and that I know is going to create a heat issue for me at some point. And while the suspension really did shine nicely on the road and was even enjoyable on the gravel roads, once I got into the bigger drop-offs, stuff where front tires were coming off the ground or more aggressive trails, I did find the suspension to be a little bit soft. In fact, really too soft. I didn't feel real comfortable jumping this bike or hitting any hills at real hard. With a little bit of luggage, 230 pounds a man on it, I did bottom out the suspension as well several times. That is something I was not used to on some of the other bikes I rode. Next thing I'm going to talk about here with you that was a little bit of a downside for me on this was the weight. Off-road, this is a big motorcycle, and you really got to carry your momentum into anything difficult, because if you get too slow and you don't have the momentum, trying to readjust or pick up is pretty tough. Now, I have not dropped the bike yet. I've been able to keep it up, which is a testament to its balance and ability, not my riding. So the bike is good and it's super doable, but a lighter bike would be much easier on the off-roads. Its overall size, along with its low clearance, does make it a little bit less desirable off-road. And while that big engine is awesome on the interstate and highways, on the dirt roads, it's a bit much. I truly wish it just came with like a 700 or even a 900cc engine that was a bit lighter, a bit more nimble, would still get me down the interstate, maybe not quite as comfortably, but would really shine in the dirt. Because for me, I want one of these bikes to ride more in the dirt than I do on the interstate. The braking was really good on this bike, front and back, and I was able to disable the traction control and the ABS braking without any issues right on the tech. A couple other things I didn't like was the seat. Although it feels great if you just push on it walking through a showroom or in a parking lot, it does not have enough support. It did wear on the backside quite a bit on the longer trips. And probably my number one complaint about it may seem pretty lame, but it's these mirrors. They just fall and they bend and they twist. I find myself every single time I ride it having to readjust these flimsy mirrors. Really a minor thing to upgrade, but a super big annoyance when every time you look to find your mirror, it's staring at the floor. So there's my pros and my cons on the Pan America. Is it the right bike for you? Well, if you plan on doing a lot of road riding and hitting some gravel and dirt roads in between, this bike is probably absolutely ideal. If you plan on doing some of the more aggressive dirt riding, it is a capable bike, but not the best choice on those situations. For me, I'm gonna enjoy the bike, I'm gonna ride the bike, it's great, If Harley ever comes out with a lighter model, I will try it, and I will say kudos to Harley-Davidson for putting out such an incredibly capable machine in your very first swing competing in the adventure market. I think statistically, this bike competes with all the big bikes square in the middle, and when thinking about the bigger bikes I rode, I found the riding to be fairly comparable. But in the end, it excelled more on the street than the other bikes I rode, and maybe fell a little bit behind them in the dirt. But that ain't gonna stop me from enjoying it and having an absolute dirty good time every chance I get, because hell, that's what I got this bike for. My next trip, I'm headed out to the Ozark Mountains. There's tons of good off-roading trails out there, and I've got a motorcycle campground and resort there called the Route 62 Motor Resort, and it's located right in the middle of it all in the little historic town of Eureka Springs, Arkansas. That will be my next trip on this bike. And we're gonna put it through the Ozark Mountains, and I'm just about positive it will carry me through everything I wanna go through there as well.